Well, in covering a myriad subjects recently, George Howe with the mental illness, Kristen Lashoto with self-defense for seniors, which is something you don't really think about too much. And now I would like to talk about something that is germane to seniors, but I think it, again, kind of can apply to your whole life. And I think we all experience this sometime in our life. It's grief, and how do you deal with it? So, with that in mind, I'd like to introduce you to this attractive lady beside me, Patti Comeau-Simonson. I've known Patti since before she was married, so I almost said Gerard there. But
yeah, anyhow. I know. Thank you.
Right, so
thank you, Paul.
It's yours. How did you get into it? You know, the whole thing. Tell us.
It's called A Book of Hope because it is about hope. We, like Paul says, we've all been touched at one time or another, if not personally, but also if you know someone that has had a personal loss, we can't escape it at all. And usually, generally, when you have had a personal loss, the loss of a loved one, you also lose hope in just about everything else around you. There just doesn't seem to be hope for anything. So through my work with hospice and just working with bereaved people, I decided first off to start a program called Hope and Healing with Peers. And it's about people who have experienced a personal loss of a loved one, and they go through a training that I had developed to facilitate people who have had a loss, because they understand, they get it. They've been where these people have been. So through that, and that took off really well, someone said to me, you know, there's a story in here, and because I've worked with so many bereaved people in the last 10 or 12 years, I know many people who have really been on a grief journey and have found hope in their lives, myself being one of them. Obviously, I have had the experience of a personal loss. I lost my husband 22 years ago. And so through my own experience, and then those who have also had the loss of either a spouse or a parent or a sibling or even a child, I say we because this book is also co-authored by a person by the name of Helen Kogan, who lost her spouse as well, went through the peer training actually, and became a peer facilitator, and she's actually one of my really wonderful peer facilitators. And while she was on her journey, so to speak, she took up photography. And she is by far one of the most amazing photographers ever. And so in this book, there are what we feel inspirational stories of people who have gone through loss, who have journeyed through their grief, and photography, pictures, beautiful pictures that will accompany each story. There's affirmations and as I say, very inspirational stories. So so it became a book of hope, and it's been doing pretty well. I don't know that it'll ever be on the #1 best-selling list.
Well, you're a published author. I mean, probably more famous than your brother. If you're not aware of it. Patti's brother is Mike Gerard of the Fools. Yeah. So we're going to get above him now in popularity.
Yeah. So it just sort of evolved into a really beautiful book. Anyone would really resonate with something in this book. If you know someone who's experienced a personal loss, or if you yourself have experienced loss, something in this book would resonate with you.
Or even if you haven't experienced it, right?
Absolutely.
If you read it, I mean,
oh yeah, absolutely, yes, because it helps you to understand. Listen, nobody understands what a person has gone through when they've lost someone, unless they have lost someone themselves. It is a special group that people unfortunately end up in, and most always not because they want to. And you can't understand it. We wouldn't want you to understand it, because it's a journey that you go on, and if you haven't walked in that person's shoes, it's hard for you to understand what that means. But when you read these stories, something comes out of it, that you may know someone, and you may say, oh my goodness, this could be Sally's story or John's story, because grief is, no one escapes it. There's nothing good about grief, but the fact,
except getting through it.
Getting through it, right. And the interesting, or not really interesting, it's been said by many in the field of bereavement that you do have to walk through it. You can't walk around it. If you choose to walk around it, it will come back someday.
Okay.
And you won't be prepared for it. It's unique to everyone. Everyone has their own time frame and their own journey to go on. So even if you haven't experienced a personal loss, I can guarantee most people know someone that has.
How are these stories written by people that you know?
Yes.
Each one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Almost everyone. Helen, the other co-author of the book, between she and I've worked with people in bereavement because of my work in hospice, and then with the peer program and doing peer support groups, we kind of really asked a lot of people if they'd be willing to be part of this. It has to be about hope, and you have to be in a certain part of your journey. If it's in the very beginning of the process, obviously it would be too difficult for you to even be part of this. But as you have progressed and learned so much about yourself and so much about the world around you and what's important and what isn't, and that's exactly what happens, those people had something to say. And it's about offering hope. I say to people, I don't know much about anything, but the one thing I do know is there is hope. There is hope. In the beginning, you feel like there isn't, but there definitely is. And you can have a joyful, happy, wonderful life if you choose to have it. So that's why the title is A Book of Hope, because we want to convey to people that there is hope after loss. There really is. And even though it may not feel like that for some time, there really is.
I had listened to a talk that Patti gave not too long ago at the Council on Aging, and I would like to compliment you on your public speaking. And I don't know if you're aware of it when you're speaking, but you could hear a pin drop in that room. I mean, no, you really did. You captivated people. I mean, people were intrigued by it. So, boy, wow. So what's the business you started? How are you reaching out to people? You mentioned that you had...
Yeah, well, and thank you for that. I've been told that if I believe in something, and I feel like if you believe in something, really, truly, passionately believe in something, and then when you talk about it, I think that comes across, and maybe that's what happened on that day. I always hope for that, but the program that I decided to develop is called Hope and Healing with Peers. And it came about because when I was working at hospice, I've since retired, but I worked in the bereavement department, and part of the job that I did was to direct people that were calling for services, were calling for help, basically. And they would call to find out if they should join a bereavement group or if they should go to counseling and work with a bereavement counselor. So it was my job to sort of listen to their story, because that's what this is about, is listening to people's stories and validating their stories. And so I would listen to their stories, try to figure out, okay, what would work best for them, and in doing so, would get them in the right direction. Another piece of my job was to have evaluations if people went to support groups or if they met with a counselor. Evaluations, we would ask them to evaluate what they thought about it. And I would be the one to look these things over and sort of evaluate what they were saying. And 99% of the time, our support groups were 8 weeks long. They were always 8 weeks long, no matter what they were, either a spousal group, loss of a spouse, loss of a parent, loss of an adult child. So they would be 8 weeks long. And one of the questions would be, what could we do? I mean, is there anything you could suggest that would make this a better experience for you? And 99% of the time, people would say, 8 weeks isn't long enough. Where do I go now? What should I do? And I just kept seeing this over and over and over again. So I talked with my then boss and said, we should have like a step 2 kind of program. And maybe it could be something that peers, people that have experienced the loss. Because bereavement counselors and social workers and chaplains, they all can't be expected to have experienced every loss that there is. It's impossible. They're skilled in grief and loss. They know how to help people find coping mechanisms to get through that horrible time. But they aren't always peers. They haven't always experienced the loss that they're talking about. But peers would. So she agreed, and so we did a pilot program, and when it first went out, it was a loss of spouse group and a loss of parent group, and there were so many people that signed up for one group. There were like 24 people that had signed up for the loss of spouse group, and we couldn't do that. I just, so, and this was after going through the training. I developed the training, and the people would go through what is a 25-hour training to learn about, they are peers, yes, but it's how to learn how to develop your group, how to have your group just sort of really evolve and bond together. And so they had to learn the skills of how to be a facilitator.
Are you looking for people to volunteer?
Well, it's interesting. I haven't done a training since last year, and right now I have 15 working facilitators. They're not all doing something right now. But I have actually a support group that's at the Ipswich Library that is ongoing now. It's actually in this coming week will be week 7. It's 8 weeks. And it's week 7. And what's really nice about this is out of those 15 facilitators, I have 2 male facilitators, which is awesome because...
There's hope for me.
Well, it's really, if you go into a support group and there are 8 women, there's probably either no men or 1. And so I was lucky enough to have a couple of males who went through the training. They're absolutely awesome. And this group that's ongoing now, there's a woman and one of the male facilitators that are facilitating the group. So it's good because you get the males' version of what it's like to heal, what they feel like, what their journey looks like. And it does look somewhat different than women.
Really?
Yeah.
You touched upon that in your talk at the COA, that men and women deal with it differently.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Which is okay.
Are you going to renew this program? Are you going to have it again at some time at the library?
Yes, I am. I had been doing spring and fall trainings.
Okay.
I'm always going to be having peer support groups ongoing. What's coming up next is a program that's going to start in December at the library. It's the first 3 Mondays, December 7th, 14th, and 21st, I believe. The first 3 Mondays in December, and it's called Bracing for the Holidays.
Wow.
Yeah, helping and hoping to navigate through the holidays, because if you're just experiencing the holidays for the first time since you've lost your loved one, it's tough. It's really, really tough. People have traditions that they don't know if they should do or not do. You just don't even feel like going through the holidays. And your family is at a loss because everybody's grieving.
Sure.
So what do we do? How do we do it? Do we change it up? Do we keep it the same? And so this is going to be a program, these 3 sessions. You can come to all 3 or just one, whichever. It's nice, I think, to come to all 3. And just find some coping and also realize hope for the future.
Do you have a singular suggestion about going through the holidays, like don't disrupt your tradition, or?
Oh no, I would say whatever feels
Each
right.
case, each
Yeah,
case.
whatever feels right
Okay.
for you, and to tell your family members or to those that you are with through the holidays, tell them what you want,
Okay.
or tell them what you don't want, or just say to them, I don't really know. I just am at a loss as to whether or not I can do it.
Plus the first time.
And
it's the first
absolutely,
time.
and there's a lot of firsts,
Sure,
lots
sure.
of firsts, and so it's really about being honest and saying, expressing what you want, and some people will want to do the same things, and others will not. It's also about honoring that person, and oftentimes you need to say to people, please mention that person's name. It's okay, because people feel like, oh gosh, if I say, if I bring up a memory or a thought about that person that's passed away, that's died, that's going to make her feel terrible or him feel awful. So nobody will say the name. And then it becomes a huge elephant in the room.
Yep.
Because everybody's thinking about that
Sure,
person.
sure.
So you need to talk about that person. And if it causes tears, that's okay. Oftentimes the tears will go into laughter, and that's even better, So,
Milestones too must. What I mean by that is like anniversaries, birthdays, and stuff must
big firsts.
bring up,
Yes.
the feelings and stuff.
Absolutely. When I gave that talk the other day that you were speaking of, I mentioned also that it would have been my 48th wedding
I
anniversary.
remember you saying that.
And, that sounds, maybe it doesn't sound like a big deal to people, but it is a big deal. It is.
Two become one. Not to
Yeah.
be.
No,
But
that's true. That's very
I
true.
want to ask you something about. I don't know if this would be classified as grief, but if you have a spouse or a family member who, say, is diagnosed with cancer, and it's going to be a year or a year and a half, is that defined as grief?
It's defined as anticipatory.
Yeah. Okay.
Because everybody is anticipating
Yeah.
what is more than likely going to happen.
Okay. Okay.
So, and that's a tough one because, people don't want to give up hope, even though the diagnosis has been given, and they may or may not be going through treatments to either keep it at bay or cure it, or they've stopped and they're just, trying to live each day as best they can. That's anticipatory grief, and it's really it's a tough thing because ultimately we know what the results are going to be, and especially if someone has a diagnosis of cancer, oftentimes it is a year or 2.
Yeah. It's frequently a death sentence.
Exactly, exactly. But I actually kind of go back to when my late husband was diagnosed. He was diagnosed with cancer, and he lived for 22 months.
Wow.
And out of those 22 months, though, I always said that David made his cancer very easy for everyone. He did not want to dwell. He did what he had to do. We did what we had to do as far as hopefully, doing all the necessary treatments and so forth in hopes that something was going to happen. And we would have moments where it looked good and then moments where it didn't look so good. It was a roller coaster. It is a roller coaster. But he wanted to try to keep his life as normal as possible. And I think that's what people try to do,
Sure,
you know,
sure.
is for as long as possible. And out of those 22 months, he did that for probably 20 of those months, you know. And so I always said he made it easy for those of us around him, you know, and because he didn't want it to be
There's an
about
element
him.
of courage in there, I would think.
Well,
on his part, you know.
I definitely think that. But, you know, he didn't want the conversation to always come back around to what was happening with him, you know. And that was just who he was, you know. I can't say that that's going to be that way for everybody, but it's anticipatory grief is a difficult thing, and yes.
Where can people get the book?
They can get the book on Amazon.com.
All right.
Yeah. And they can also get the book at our little store downtown,
Good.
Gifts for the Soul, which
Okay.
is down on, that's Market Street.
Next to
The jewelry?
family store. No? The other side.
Across the street, next to the jewelry store.
Oh, Tetra.
Yeah, next to that, up the street, in between the pub.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
For the
okay,
Soul,
yeah,
Gifts for the
okay.
Soul.
Yeah.
And so you can get the book there. And I will say it makes a great gift. So, I mean, and it's, you know, people think, oh, you know, grief, it's such a sad thing. Well, yeah, it is. But, you know, you can come out on the other side of it. You
Yeah,
know?
I mean, there's what is it, light at the end of the tunnel, sort of, I guess,
Wow,
but, you know.
there is.
we
There's
get through it.
hope.
Yeah.
There's hope, you know, and this book is about hope.
Okay.
So I hope that it is helpful for those who will get it, and I've had really good feedback from it. So
I got to hand it to you, kiddo. It's I think it's quite an accomplishment, and I think you're gonna.
thank you, Paul.
I think you're gonna help a lot of people.
Well, that's the goal. Even if it's one person at a time, that's the goal.
All right.
Thank you, Paul.
Come back.
Thank
All
you.
right. There you have it. Thanks.